Thank you, Madam Clerk. I'm going to call the meeting to order. Welcome, everybody. Do we have any add-ons to our agenda here tonight? Madam Clerk?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. And through you, we have a couple of additions this evening. So we have two pieces of correspondence that will be added to the correspondence section of your agenda, specifically 11.1 regarding the Grey Sauble Conservation Authority correspondence. Specifically, we have a letter to Bill Walker from Grey Sauble regarding Bill 229. Secondly, we have a letter from the Greenbelt Council regarding removal of Schedule 6 from Ontario Bill 229. We also have two additions to our closed session discussions this evening. One additional item relating to personal matters about identifiable individuals, and a position, plan, procedure, criteria, or instruction to be applied to any negotiations carried on or to be carried on by or on behalf of the municipality or local board. That's everything.
Thank you, Brittany. Is there any other add-ons to our agenda here tonight? Seeing none, do we have something to approve the agenda as presented? Moved by Councillor Colburn, second by Councillor Thompson. Any discussion on the motion? All in favor of the motion? It is carried. So moving on for agenda, declaration of interest. You can clear anytime you see fit during the meeting. Minutes of previous meetings.
Back up, Mr. Mayor. My hand is up. I have a pecuniary interest.
Okay, sorry, Councillor Barfoot, I could not see you. Go ahead.
Okay. In invoice number CBCR 20157, and it's vendor number 110129. It's on page 4 of the financial statements. I have a pecuniary interest in that. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Barfoot. Madam Clerk, you attend?
Yeah.
Okay, moving on for agenda, we're down to our next recommendation is that the minutes of the council held on November 4th, 2020 be adopted. Someone to move to put on the floor, please. Moved by Councillor Barfoot, second by Councillor Pringle. Is there any discussion on those minutes? Seeing none, all in favor? It's carried. The next recommendation that the minutes of the special council meeting held on November 9th, 2020 be adopted. Someone to move to put on the floor, please. Moved by Councillor Colburn, second by Deputy Mayor Carlton. Any discussion? All in favor of the motion? It's carried. Our next recommendation that the minutes of the special council meeting held on November 16th, 2020 be adopted. Someone to move to put on the floor, please. Moved by Councillor Thompson, second by Councillor Pringle. Any discussion? Seeing none, all in favor? It's carried. We have no announcements, no public hearings. Presentations. We have a presentation from Sergeant Peter Marshall from the Ontario Provincial Police Service Contract Renewal. Peter, are you on the line?
Yes, good evening, Your Worship.
Go ahead, Peter.
Okay. Well, good evening, Your Worship and members of council. I've been asked to present a presentation on the billing model and I guess your contract renewal as well. And so I put together a small one. I guess my first question would be, how familiar are you folks with the billing model with the OPP?
I think we're quite familiar, Peter.
Okay, and the reason for my questioning is I'm just more of a curiosity as to how in depth you'd like me to go with this. I know time's always of an essence, so.
You have 10 minutes to put it any way you want.
Okay, perfect. That sounds great. Okay, so just a quick overview of do you have the presentation up before I proceed?
Peter, I've just shared our screen with you. So as you move through your slides, if you can just say next slide, I'll continue to move through them for you.
Okay, that sounds great. So I will just for slide number 2, just the outline, and those are just a couple of topics we're going to cover off, and I'll do it relatively very high level. just to give a brief overview, and then just how your billing looks as well. So if we move on to slide number 3, that essentially provides information on the OPP's annual budget, which is about 1.1 billion. And in terms of what we collect or what we look to recover from our municipal partners, it's about 35% of that total budget. And that is essentially where or that is exactly where your billing falls into place. The remainder of the 64%, those are all provincial resources, and those are services provided to all of the municipalities across the province that the OPP polices, and outside to any other municipalities that require the police service, the OPP's police service as well. So those are all provincially covered areas of policing that we don't bill back to our municipal partners. So again, about 35% is what we look to recover. If we just move on to slide number 4, again, very quickly, how the billing model came to be. So in 2012, we were tasked with trying to find a billing method that was more equitable across the province for all our municipalities. And there was a wide range of disparity between the billing, as we had some municipalities paying less than $50 per property, and we had some paying over $800 per property. So what's really, we had to pull those together and streamline it, and that was the purpose of the current billing model. And once implemented in 2015, you can see from there until 2020, and again, it's still maintaining that, but it really pulled it together and made it a lot more in line for our municipal partners across the province. And where we've been able to hold or maintain the average billing between proper cost per property between $350 to $360 per property over the last 5 to 6 years. So it really shows the positive outcome of implementing this new billing model. With the exception, I guess, you do have municipalities who are paying a lot less than what they are now, and of course they don't like that. But there was no way we could police for less than $50 per property, but we could definitely do it for a lot less than over $800 per property. Move on to slide number 5. It's the billing model, and in general, it's made up of 3 areas. You have your base service, and I like to consider that the bricks and mortar of policing. That's what allows for our men and women to be out there policing. It's the facilities we police out of, the equipment that we use, and it also covers off things like proactive policing, criminal investigation, that sort of thing. So that amount of money, every municipality across the province pays the exact same dollar figure. So what you pay is the same as Red Lake or as Hawkesbury. Where the difference lies is with your calls for service, and that's what identifies municipalities' differences from the next one. And those are all the billable calls for service. So every call for service that the OPP attends, it may not necessarily be a billable call for service, but these are the ones that are billable, and they're listed in the annual billing statement that we provide. It's about a 4 or 5 page spreadsheet included with the billing model, with the annual billing, and it outlines all the billable calls for service. And the additional costs, again, these are specific to each municipality, because not everybody pays for court security, not everybody pays for cleaning or accommodations, enhancements, or this sort of thing. So those are additional costs, and they are labeled on your annual billing statement, and the ones that we recover from your municipality. So that's essentially what makes up the billing portion of our billing model when it comes to the for our municipal partners. In the next slide, on number 6, that just, if you recall, I gave you about 35%. It's about a 35% recoveries we're looking for from our municipalities. And for 2021, that kind of breaks down what we're looking for, because the base and the calls for service are broken down into percentages, and that is where we establish what we're looking to recover for our base, what we're looking to recover for our calls for service, and then the additional calls for costs as well. So that kind of just gives it just a little bit more of a breakdown as to how it looks. The slide number 7, it just sort of recaps what I was saying before in regards to what we're looking for total cost recovery. But the green is more of the more important numbers that I'd like to highlight on this is that shows the average cost per property since 2015. So you can see that it's been relatively stable, and keep in mind or note at the bottom there that up to 2019, we provide the reconciled numbers. 2020 and 21, they're still based on the estimates that we provided for our municipalities. But the numbers still stay relatively in that bracket between 350 and 360. 2019 going $2 over. Moving on to slide number 8. This is just a breakdown of how you can see what your annual billing statement looks like. I won't go into too terribly detailed explanation of this. But what I'd like just to highlight is the property counts. These property counts, they will change annually, and they're based off of the numbers we receive from MPAC. So they're not numbers that we come up with. They are numbers that are gathered through MPAC, and so that's the most reliable source of property counts that we can receive. And then that's how the billing goes for your municipality. We use those numbers and we cost that against what the base cost is. So for 2021, $177.48. And again, that's the same across the province for every municipality. And then we break down what your calls for service are. And the calls for service, we average that over 4 years. And we can go into that just a little bit more detail below, but it's a 4-year average as to what we're looking for or what we're looking at. And so what we provide you for 2021, the annual billing for that. So we're providing to you this year. We'll go through all of next year. So we'll go through 2021 and then reconciliation, the difference between what the actual cost is and what the estimate is. That reconciliation number will appear on the 2022 billing statement. So there's about a 2-year gap between, because we give the estimate, we need the actual numbers, and then we apply the actual numbers to the next billing statement. And that would be 2022 for you folks. Do I have any questions at this point in regards to sort of what I've gone over?
Does council have any questions of Sergeant Marshall?
Okay, perfect. And I'm always available for any questions later on too if they happen to come up. No problem at all. If we move on to slide number 9, this gives you a better idea as to how we do our billing. So I mentioned before, everything's based on a 4-year average. So what these, we have 9 billable working groups listed on this slide. And each one of those working groups, if you were to go into your annual billing statement, you would see, when I talked earlier about that 4 or 5 page, it's like a spreadsheet that's included with the annual billing statement. That breaks down all the calls for service, billable calls for service under each working group. So we take each working group and then we apply the average numbers that of calls for service. So we have drug possession, so under the first category, and we can see straight across. So between 2016 and 2019, we have a 4-year average of 7 calls for service for that particular billing group. And we apply that to a provincial time standard. Now that time standard is the average number for investigations that take place underneath drug possession across the province. We achieve that number through our daily activity report. So every officer, when they complete their shift, they go into the daily activity report and they put in what they did for the course of the day, what types of investigations, and how long they spent on that investigation. So I like to use an example of a domestic investigation, because from my experience on the road, you can conduct an investigation. Some may take half an hour, some may take 6, 7, 8, 9 hours, 20 hours, depends on the complexity behind it. And so all of those numbers that each officer spends on each call for service is averaged, because each call for service does not have a specific time that an officer would account for, because they're spread out. So we take the average time spent for each billable working group, or all those calls for service underneath each working group, and we establish that time standard. And so for drug possession, that's 6.5 hours. So we apply that to 7, and then we come out to the weighted time, total weighted time, which is about 46 hours spent under that working group. We apply to that to the provincial weighted time as to what your slice of the pie is for that billable working group, and then it comes down to what the estimated costs for call to service cost is. Okay, so, and I have had some questions in the past. They're saying, well, what if an officer gets dispatched to a call for service and it takes them half an hour to get there? Are we still being billed for that half an hour? It doesn't matter if the officer spends 5 minutes at that call or 20 hours at that call, you know, and that includes the time to get there. You're still being billed for that provincial time standard of 6.5. Okay, so that travel time does not come into play for your specific municipality because it's all based on the provincial time standard. If we move on to slide number 10, this is just a highlight of your municipality, where your costs per property are since 2015, and that compares it to the average cost per property. So I mean, you folks are doing very well. You are well below the average cost per property across the province, which is always nice to see. And again, here we are, just essentially give a graph comparison to the previous slide where you sit to the OPP average of cost per property. So again, well below, which is great. That is a very high level overview of the billing model. And as far as slide number 12 goes, I really don't have much more to elaborate than what's there in regards to the new Community Safety and Policing Act that's coming out. I know it's a question that's raised quite a bit, but until the regulations are written, we're in the dark just as much as you are. We do know that there will be no more contracts. It does not change the way that we provide our policing services for your municipality. It just means there's no contract involved. So everybody will be policed with no contract. However, there will be the provision for enhancements, which a lot of municipalities currently use. So we'll just have an enhancement agreement. And then as far as the boards go, the current Section 10 police service boards that you currently have will become part of a detachment police service board. And unless you decide to go with another police service, then that will be performed underneath that police service board, that municipal board. So in regards to the billing model, that's kind of the very high level overview of that. Now it is contract renewal season for you folks, and the contract itself is the same as the last one that you entered into. There are no differences other than the fact that under Section 26, that speaks to the new Community Safety and Policing Act that's coming out. So once that new act comes out, we don't have a date for that as to when it's supposed to. I know COVID-19 has really played a part in delaying that, and then again with the writing of the regulations as well. So we don't have a date as to when that new act is going to come out. So Section 26 of the contract renewal will just speak to that the contract is valid for the period of the contract unless the new act comes into effect prior to the expiry date of your contract. Then the contract becomes null and void, and again, policing will remain the same. It just means that this piece of paper will just become null and void at that point in time. Now, one of the questions that were brought forward, I believe, was from your bylaw officer in regards to bylaws and being specific as to what bylaws are enforced and what rules, when police or when the OPP would possibly look after some of these bylaws if in the absence of the bylaw officer, whether it's a sick day or it could be past business hours, weekends, etc. So the contract does not speak to specific bylaws. The contract, as part of Section 10, does allow for the implementation of bylaws to be enforced by the OPP, but the specific bylaws are put in place through a mutual agreement between the municipality and the local detachment. And then that list will be put together and it should be reviewed annually. So because there may be some bylaws that that may be added to that list, there may be some that are removed from that list. So it's always a good practice to review the bylaw list annually and then come up with the agreement as to how these bylaws are going to be enforced with your local detached commander. Again, it's not part of the makeup of the contract. The contract allows for bylaws, but the actual bylaws themselves are an agreement between the municipality and the local detachment commander. Short of that, is there any questions in regards to what I have brought forward at this time?
Thank you, Peter. A question from the chair, if you don't mind. Maybe you can answer, maybe you can't. I'm just curious about, have you heard any rumor about the police service boards being all amalgamated in this area into one board?
Sorry, you broke up a couple times there.
I'm just wondering, have you heard any rumors about the police service boards in this area being amalgamated into one board?
Well, the way that it looks at this point, and again, they're still really coming out with how the landscape will look with these new boards. So at this point, it'd be one detachment board. So there'll be, and again, what the representatives will look like, I don't know. I couldn't give you an honest answer, but it'd be one police service board under the detachment in that area, and you'd have a representative from, say, your municipality sitting on that board. And so it would run relatively the same, but other than each municipality who has a contract on their own board, it'd just be one board in that detachment area. But again, we're still in the dark as to how the boards will actually look, and that was the purpose of that roundtable Q&A session that we had back in February, if you recall, where the ministry had their representatives going across the province and just getting input from our municipal partners. So unfortunately, I couldn't give you an honest answer as to how that looks, nor could I even give you the rumor mill, because I really don't know.
Well, thanks very much for that. Does council have any questions of Sergeant Marshall? Carol?
Yes, just a bit of information. Councillor Barfoot speaking, Peter.
Okay.
Get a call from a ratepayer where there's a grow up going up in the middle of a residential neighborhood. It's my understanding when they apply for a license that they tell the OPP, like as a councillor, I felt sort of hung out to dry because I had no answers for this. I spoke to our chief building official and our bylaw enforcement officer. He went on the helpline who sent him. It was like phoning Bell Canada. You go to 5 different people and you still don't get an answer.
Mm-hmm.
Finally, the CAO at the time had to pursue it. Why, when people are given a permission by the province or the feds to start a grow op, that the municipalities are not consulted or we don't know anything about it?
Well, I mean, that's a tough question for me to answer because that's sort of out of my wheelhouse. But I'd be surprised if they could start a legal grow operation without actually coming to the municipality for whatever, especially like the building department, looking for whatever permits are required to construct this. So unless it's an illegal grow op, again, I'd be surprised if that hadn't gone through council for approval first before being allowed to construct that facility, because they're not small facilities; they are a large facility. Now, on the other hand, too, I mean, every household is allowed to grow 4 marijuana plants for their own consumption. So, is it possible that it's just a matter of perception? You know, somebody's growing some marijuana plants and somebody looks at it as a grow up. I mean, without knowing your area and what's being cited as the example, it's tough for me. My suggestion would be to reach out to Paul Chambers, who is your detachment commander, and maybe have those conversations with Paul and just start that dialogue from that end. So
let me add some more information for you. This was a greenhouse operation of floral products. That went out of business. These people bought it. I did a little bit of research myself. Apparently it's in 3 or 4 different names, and it's in the middle of a residential area. I just question why the municipality, and I don't know, maybe the other councillors can speak up. I don't ever remember hearing that coming before council.
Councillor Barfoot, may I suggest that we maybe take this up with Paul on a separate conversation? Peter is really here to present his budget, the OPP's budget, and maybe we're putting him on the spot. That's what I'm suggesting. If you don't mind, Councillor Barfoot, we would take that up with our commander, Paul, and have those conversations. Does council have any other questions on the budget as presented by Sergeant Marshall? I cannot see anybody.
Paul has her hand raised.
Oh, Carol, go ahead, Carol. Councillor.
No, I was just slow getting my hand down. If you are chair of the Police Services Board, I trust that you will be bringing that up at your next meeting then. This happened over 1.5 years ago.
Yes, Councillor Barfoot, I made note of that, and I certainly will get you in on that conversation when we have it too. Does any other council member have any questions on the budget presentation by Sergeant Marshall? Grant, go ahead. Councillor Pringle.
Yeah, thanks, Peter. That was a great presentation. I'm a new councillor here in Georgia Bluffs, and I found your presentation actually very easy to follow. And the numbers, were very easy to understand, and appreciate your time tonight to explain it to us. So thanks very much.
Well, my pleasure. Thank you for having me.
Madam Clerk, go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I just wanted to highlight, also appended to Paul's presentation this evening is the renewal agreement between the township and the OPP. So at this time, we'd welcome questions about the agreement as well. If there's any specific questions of council that Paul can answer. If there is not, then we will be presenting a bylaw to enact the agreement along with the staff report at next week's council meeting.
Okay. Councillor Coburn, go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Mr. Marshall, I appreciate the statistics you provided in showing us the per household cost. And I note that you used the provincial average as the comparator. I wondered if you had any data that compared our per household rate with similar sized municipalities.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, a great question. And in the interest of giving you some homework to do, because I like that, because generally what I do is I always get this little preamble at the end there, an endamble, I guess. If you go onto the OPP.ca website, and if you there'll be a search bar there. If you just put in billing or billing model, it'll bring up all of the billing information that we have that comes out of our bureau, out of our financial side. And there's actually a spreadsheet in there, and it's a great cost comparator to every municipality across the province for all the cost per property. So you can go in there, you can look at yours, and you can pull up any name you want. It's all in one big list, and that will give you a great idea as to what other municipalities are and have been paying across the province that are relatively. So without me getting into that, because again, you know your community better than I do, and you will know the communities out there, your partners out there who are relatively the same. So it's just a very quick reference for you to have a look at. But again, it's under opp.ca. And just put in billing in the search bar, and it'll pull up that plus a wealth of other information that I always suggest council members have a look at, because when you do have your constituents asking you questions, it's always based to go with fact as opposed to the rumor mill. And any financial questions, you're going to probably find your answers in there and be able to provide those facts to your folks.
Thank you, Mr. Marshall. I'm not sure I'm thankful for the added homework and reading, but I do appreciate knowing where to go to get that information.
That's my pleasure.
Thank you, Councillor Coburn. We really look forward to that report that you're bringing to council. Is there any other questions on Sergeant Marshall's presentation tonight? Seeing none, Sergeant Marshall, thank you very much for presenting this to council, and I really appreciate your time.
That was my pleasure anytime. And again, if you have any questions, always feel free to either go through through Brittany or through Paul Chambers.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Okay, we'll move on to our agenda. No delegations. We're down to our consent agenda. Is there any item on the consent agenda that any council member would like to hold for further discussion? Sorry? Kathy, Councilor Colburn, you have your hand up?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I know you'd be disappointed if I didn't pull something from the consent agenda. I just wonder if we could have a conversation about some of the information listed under the amendments proposed to Bill 218. So that would be 9.4.6 on the consent agenda.
Okay, we'll pull that. Is there any other item that any council member would like to pull? Seeing none. Madam Clerk?
Just as a reminder, Councillor Barfoot has declared an interest regarding agenda item 9.1 accounts. So Councillor Barfoot, if you'd like to declare so now as well, just so the minutes can reflect that you've declared it at the appropriate point, and please refrain from voting.
Yeah, I do have a conflict in that. Payable.
Okay, thank you, Councilor Barfoot. Okay, the recommendation is that the Council of the Township of Georgian Bluffs adopts a consent agenda for information and circulated less items 9.4.6. Someone to move, put it on the floor, please. Moved by Councilor Colbert, second by Deputy Mayor Carlton. If there's no further discussion, all in favor of the motion? I cannot see Councilor Thompson or Councilor Barfoot, so I don't know how they're voting. Or Councilor Thompson?
I voted for.
Thank you. Okay, the motion was carried. So we're moving off the agenda. Now we're going to pull four. We're going to pull 9.4.6 on the agenda and have further discussion. Councilor Colburn, how may I turn it over to you and let you start?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. This particular item pertains to the proposed amendments to Bill 218. And I have had to do quite a bit of reading about what all this entails, to be honest. My understanding is that the proposed amendments will include the removal of any municipality's ability to include ranked ballots in the voting system. And so here's what I think I know. This is a system that appears to be more democratic. It also is a system that has been used by London, Ontario, and has been used successfully. It tends to make governments more diverse, and it's just an option. So we, to my knowledge, have never implemented that or opted for that particular option of ranked ballot voting, but I don't see any advantage to having that ability to be removed from the municipality's purview or decision-making ability. So I would just like to say that I'm opposed to removing that option for ranked ballot voting. And I would move that we send a similar letter of concern opposing that amendment to Bill 218.
Are you proposing a notice of motion or a motion? Madam Clerk, before I go to Deputy Mayor Carlton, Madam Clerk, can you answer that?
Sorry, yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor. I just wanted to point out that item 16.3 is exactly, Councillor Coburn, what you had just mentioned. We're opposing Bill 218, including the ranked ballot option being removed from the Municipal Elections Act. So that was a notice of motion that was provided at the November 18th Committee of the Whole meeting.
Thank you, Brittany. My apologies. I thought we were just opposing the shortened timelines for the election process. I didn't realize that our motion included this particular amendment as well, so my apologies.
Deputy Mayor Carlton, you had your hand up.
I did, but just for that exact thing, I had made the notice of motion back in November about that very item, so we already have it on there.
Madam Clerk.
Thank you. I specifically did reference the amendments made to the nomination period, and I did make specific reference to that in the motion. I did not make specific reference to ranked ballots. I just said that we're opposing the changes to the Municipal Act made through Bill 218. When we get to item 16.3, if council feels we need to add stronger wording regarding ranked ballots, then we can by all means do so.
Okay, if that's okay with you, Councillor Colburn, we'll pick it up then. Okay, so do we need a motion to accept this piece of correspondence or just accept it? This is accepted? Okay. Madam Clerk, just so I don't get confused, I do very easily. We're down to staff reports. No, I missed something?
We're down to correspondence, 11.1, the Gray Sauble Conservation Authority correspondence. And as a reminder, we did add 2 items of correspondence also for consideration.
Okay. Thank you, Madam Clerk. We're down to correspondence. Bill 229, request for support. I believe you have a motion prepared for this, Madam Clerk.
So a couple of things in through you, Mr. Mayor. We also have, so yes, that's correct. I do have the motion prepared that was circulated by the Gray Sauble Conservation Authority searching for support in their plea to the province to not have these amendments made. We also, as per my email today, have a couple of residents online that have submitted some comments for consideration here today. They are on our Teams event, should council have any questions for them, or should you be so willing to hear them speak. That will require a motion of council, just a verbal motion to allow them to speak. But through you, Mr. Chair, at this time, I would like to read their comments if I may.
Yes, go ahead, Madam Clerk.
Thank you. So as a point of clarity, these comments were submitted by Merla and Vaughn Johnstone in regards to the changes proposed in Bill 229. So it starts, these observations and comments are directed at some of the points put forward in the proposed GRCA petition to the provincial government. 1, conservation authorities, along with Conservation Ontario and many environmental groups, were part of the consultation process put forward earlier this year when all stakeholders were consulted. This was after consultation between the CAs and the province in 2019 as part of an 18-month process. The Township of Georgian Bluffs had the former town clerk as a representative at one of these meetings. Letters from MMH and MECP in 2019 to municipalities and conservation authorities had advised both groups about an ongoing study pertaining to a return to the core mandate. I believe due process was followed. 2, the objective of these changes was to bring the CAs back to their original core mandate, flood, drought, and erosion control. Any other programs offered by the CAs can still be engaged through a memorandum of understanding or written agreement. 3, the repeal of issuing stop work orders prevents warrantless entry onto private property. It prevents the forming of an unaccountable enforcement agency with more powers of an entry than a provincial police officer. CA personnel can still enforce their act on their own properties or under written consenting agreements with private or public property owners. All safeguards are still in place through the municipality, as in stop work orders and entry onto property. If there are grounds for immediate intervention, the building code should be adaptable enough to include hazard, public health, and public safety issue concerns. 4, it is disturbing that CAs do not want legislation in place that requires them to be accountable and transparent. The monies levied by the CAs belongs to the taxpayer, who should be allowed to see how it is being used. 5, the composition and allegiance of the CA's board of directors was also debated in the consultations. Members of municipal council who are on the conservation board were voted in foremost as councillors by the people in the municipality to be the voice of the people. Restraints on councillors' first obligation to the welfare of the municipality and their constituents should not be acceptable. It is a conflict to put the agenda of the CAs as the primary allegiance of municipal councillors. My thoughts on Bill 229, Schedule 6 are that the changes are necessary. A conservation authority is an entity created and funded by the province and the municipalities. It should be accountable to and should work with their creators instead of assuming a superior and sometimes adversarial position. A good example was the LPAT appeal of the 2018 Georgia Bluffs Comprehensive Bylaw by GSCA. Under the apprehension of an extension and expensive legal process, Council conceded to the CA demands to include approximately 4,000 additional acres of private property as EP zoning. Many residents objected on the grounds of loss of property usage, enjoyment, and value, which may also result in loss of realty tax dollars. Municipal councils and planning departments consistently and rightly referred to provincial policy that they were obliged to follow in making everyday decisions. The MECP and MMH letters of 2019 should have been an early indicator of provincial policy direction. The presentation of Bill 229, Schedule 6, should be accepted as a clear statement of provincial policy direction. Signing onto the CA petition against Bill 229, Schedule 6 may be seen as a further disregard for and an open attack on provincial policy. Please take these comments into consideration regarding the Conservation Authority proposal. The bill is not scheduled for passage until December 7th, 2020. We request that council members take time for more consideration of the issue before rushing into an immediate decision today. And as I mentioned, Merla and Vaughn are online. Should council have any questions regarding his correspondence?
Thank you. Madam Clerk, do you have other correspondence?
No.
No. Does council have any questions of Vaughn or Myrna? See none. Madam Clerk, we do have a motion prepared for this piece of correspondence. Do we want to read that now or later?
Yes, I can also read that. I will follow up with, prior to my reading this, I did reach out to the Grace Falls Conservation Authority today regarding what our timelines are, and they are fairly strict, just so council's aware. While Vaughn is correct, there's, it will be presented on December 7th, I believe he quoted. Talks begin in November. So we do have quite a short time frame to get this information to Provincial. So should council be willing to pass the motion that I'm about to read, we do have to do so tonight. So through you, Mr. Chair, I will start, and this as well is very lengthy, so everyone bear with me.
If you go ahead.
Okay. Whereas the province has introduced Bill 229, Protect, Support, and Recover from COVID-19 Act, Schedule 6, Conservation Authorities Act, whereas the legislation introduces a number of changes and new sections that could remove and or significantly hinder the Conservation Authority's role in regulating development, permit appeal process, and engaging in review and appeal of planning applications. Whereas we, the Township of Georgian Bluffs, rely on the watershed expertise provided by local conservation authorities to protect residents, property, and local natural resources on a watershed basis by regulating development and engaging in reviews of applications submitted under the Planning Act. Whereas the changes allow the minister to make decisions without Conservation Authority watershed data and expertise. Whereas the legislation suggests that the minister will have the ability to establish standards and requirements for non-mandatory programs which are negotiated between the conservation authorities and municipalities to meet local watershed needs. Whereas these proposed changes will impact Ontario's ability to adapt to and mitigate the effects of climate change by undermining the work of conservation authorities to keep development out of high-risk areas and protect natural infrastructure. Whereas municipalities require a longer transition time to put in place agreements with conservation authorities for non-mandatory programs. Whereas municipalities believe that the appointment of municipal representatives on Conservation Authority boards should be a municipal decision, and the chair and vice chair of the Conservation Authority board should be elected as per the discretion of the Conservation Authority board. Whereas the changes to the duties of members contradicts the fiduciary duty of a Conservation Authority board member to represent the best interests of Conservation Authority and its responsibility to the watershed. Whereas conservation authorities have already been working with the province, development sector, and municipalities to streamline and speed up permitting planning approvals through the Conservation Ontario's Client Service and Streamlining Initiative. Whereas changes to the legislation will create more administrative burden and cost for the conservation authorities and their municipal partners and potentially result in delays in the development of the approval process. Whereas the combined contribution of municipal levy and self-generated revenue support 93% of the Grey Sauble Conservation Authority budget. Whereas the provincial contribution to this budget is 7%, the majority of which is for drinking water source protection. And whereas municipalities value and rely on the natural habitats and water resources within our jurisdiction for the health and well-being of residents, municipalities value the Conservation Authority's work to prevent and manage the impacts of flooding and other natural hazards, and municipalities value the Conservation Authority's work to ensure safe drinking water. Therefore, be it resolved that the Province of Ontario work with conservation authorities to address their concerns by removing Schedule 6 from Bill 229, which affects the changes to the Conservation Authorities Act and the Planning Act, that the Province of Ontario delay enactment of clauses affecting municipal concerns, that the Province of Ontario provide a longer transition period up to December 2022 for non-mandatory programs to enable coordination of Conservation Authority municipal budget process, that the province respect the current Conservation Authority/municipal relationships, and that the province embrace their long-standing partnership with the conservation authorities and provide them with the tools and finance resources that they need to effectively implement their watershed management role.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. Do I have somebody to move to put on the floor, please? Moved by Deputy Mayor Carlton, second by Councillor Colburn. Is there any discussion on the motion before us? And please don't ask how to read it again. Councillor Colburn, do you have a question?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Sorry, I'm getting some feedback. Let me know if I'm too loud. Since you and Deputy Mayor Carlton are reps on the Grey Sauble Conservation Authority, I wondered if you might want to provide some comment.
We've had a bit of discussion, Councillor Colburn, on these various items. Our CAO, Tim Lantley, he did outline the highlights for us, and they seem to be quite alarming in some areas that I have real concerns with. I really think we do need to take a real good look at what the province is trying to do to the Sauble conservation or any conservation. And it's, without getting into great detail, Deputy Clerk or Deputy Mayor, do you have any comments? I don't have my piece of paper in front of me. I think maybe she does.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So some of the items that were brought forward to this afternoon's meeting would be, as an example, Grey Sauble Board of Director members could be in a pecuniary conflict type situation where he used the example of, say, Chatsworth being upstream from other municipalities. So they decide to put a development in place that affects everybody downstream from them. They vote for their municipality to put that in place because that's what the new legislation says. But it then moves forward on downstream, and while they've approved their development, Grey Sauble can't actually issue a permit because it doesn't meet the criteria. There's a number of items such as that. Programs that would make sense for us to be running locally and being self-funding through those programs could get axed by the provincial government because they don't see them as being of value in, say, the Toronto conservation area. So there's a lot of different things like that that are affected by this proposed agenda coming forward from the provincial government that aren't in our best interest in this locality.
Hopefully that answers some of your concerns, Councillor Colburn. It's a very, very itemized changes that they want to make, and some of them are very alarming. Deputy Mayor Carlton.
Sorry, I just thought of something else that was added today. Conservation Authority looks at things on a watershed basis. where some of these decisions that are made by the local conservation authority could be overturned by the minister using a ministerial zoning order. And that would mean back to the same thing, the conservation authority can't issue a permit. So who's going to issue the permit for it? They're also not looking at it using the scientific data that the local conservation authority is based on what's happening in our watershed. So there's just some little things behind the scenes that shouldn't be taking place.
Okay. Madam Clerk, I cannot see, is there any other comments from any council member? If there isn't any, I'm going to ask for a recorded vote from the chair, please.
We haven't done one of those in a while. Okay, so when I call your name, please indicate whether you are for or against the motion as I read. Councillor Kathy Moore-Coburn.
For.
Councillor Carol Barfoot.
For.
Councillor Ryan Thompson.
For.
Councillor Grant Pringle.
For.
Deputy Mayor Sue Carlton.
For.
And Mayor Dwight Burley.
For.
Thank you, and that carries.
Thank you. Moving on to our agenda, we're down to committee reports. The recommendation is that the minutes of the committee of the whole meeting held on November 18th, 2020 be adopted, including recommendations COW 2020-82 to COW 2020-88. Someone to move, put it on the floor, please. Moved by Councillor Coburn, second by Deputy Mayor Carlton. Is there any discussion on the motion before us? Seeing none, all in favor of the motion? It's carried. Councillor Thompson, are you for or against?
For.
Councillor Barker, are you for or against?
I got my hand up.
Sir.
Sorry, Mr. Mayor, if I could just interject here. Councillor Thompson and Councillor Barfoot, we do have you guys up on the projector system in council chambers. So it may be easier if you could just indicate your vote verbally rather than raising your hand, as sometimes it is difficult for the mayor to see virtual hand raising. So if you wouldn't mind in moving forward this evening, just verbalizing your indication of for or against all motions, please. Thank you.
I appreciate that. I cannot see that your hands up on that screen.
I can do that. Sorry. My battery's been just plummeting. So I've been trying to save battery by staying off video. So what I'll do is I'll come on video when it comes time to vote.
Thank you. I believe the motion was carried. We're down to staff reports. A recommendation here is that the 2021 council and committee meeting calendar be approved. Someone to move, put it on the floor, please. Moved by Councillor Barfoot, second by Councillor Pringle. Madam Clerk, do you want to speak to this?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I don't really have a lot of comments. We have to do this annually to approve our meeting schedule for the next year. I will say that as is reflected in my report, the conferences are still kind of up in the air. I would assume that for the most part, they will be held on a virtual basis, but I haven't heard a lot of confirmation from, for example, AMO, FCM, etc. The only conference that has confirmed the way that they are hosting their conference is Roma. And I have registered both the mayor and Councillor Moore-Coburn to attend. Also, I have included inter-township fire board of management meetings throughout 2021, just in case our negotiations are not concluded by the end of 2021. So just being prepared for all options. But otherwise, I'm open to questions if anyone has any questions about the 2021 calendar.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. The only question I got on the calendar is being very, very positive. If COVID tries to reline itself next year, do the times of the meetings will have to all change, or will we continue on the rest of the year with our times?
So I would say we would approach the situation as remaining at 5 o'clock, as you know, that's how we've advertised, and I think the public is getting used to our meetings being held at 5 o'clock, so I'd be hesitant to continue to change the time. But with that being said, we can take every situation by ear, take it case by case and see what works best.
Okay, thank you. Does Council, Deputy Mayor Carl, go ahead.
I just have a question about the conferences. Seeing as they're probably mostly going to be virtual this year, so less expense in going travel time and accommodations, is it possible when we look at budget this year that we could each be allowed 3 conferences?
Madam Treasurer.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. I have no concerns with that. We typically budget approximately $3,000 per counselor for conferences and training. So you are 100% correct. It will be cheaper to just attend virtually, so I have no problem with that. But we can definitely discuss as part of budget discussions.
So, Madam Treasurer, just to make it very clear, our policy says each councillor is allowed 2 conferences, so if you want to go to a 3rd one, still should apply to council to get approval to go.
Let's discuss this at budget time. It doesn't really affect the meeting schedule that we're discussing here tonight, so I think we should discuss that budget.
Okay, fair enough. If there's no other discussion on the motion before us, all in favor of the motion? Councillor Thompson, or is your battery dead? There you are. And Councillor Burke, good. Okay, motion was carried. We're down to our next recommendation. That the council hereby appoints members to the township committees and boards as follows. And I'll just read the motion, Madam Clerk, and then make changes. Yeah. First one is Owentown North Grey Union Public Library Board, Grey Salt Conservation Authority Board, Charlotte Lake Village Improvement Board, Intertownship Fire Department Board of Management, Grey County Farm Safety Association, and that community members' appointments be extended to 2022, and that a bylaw to formalize committee appointments be presented for the consideration at the December 2nd, 2020 council meeting. Someone to move it on the floor, please. Moved by Deputy Mayor Carlson, second by Councillor Colburn. Madam Clerk, do you want to speak to this?
Sorry, yes, just give me 1 second. I'm having difficulty with the camera that's located in council chambers right now.
I don't have a problem with that.
Okay, so I will deal with that once we start our discussions, but for now, Councillor Barfoot, Councillor Thompson, and Councillor Colburn, you'll be looking at me, not council, but I will fix that once we get going. So I know this has been a long time coming, this report. So as we are all aware, in 2018, it's okay, Brian, I think I fixed it. Thank you. In 2018, following the commencement of our council term, we sat down and appointed various members to various committees. At that time, we also appointed community members to all said committees. So it has come time for us to renew said appointments. Everyone was appointed on a 2-year term. And the original intention of this was to give council the opportunity to sit on varying committees throughout their term of council. Now, from what I recollect, also one of the main intentions was to ensure that different council members got to sit on both of our former standing committees, being Operations Committee and Corporate Services, Finance and Building Committee. So as we all know as well, we have since dissolved those committees. So Throughout my report, I make reference to various committees that we currently have at the township. Some of them are statutory, meaning they are required by provincial legislation, and others are standing or advisory committees. It is my intention tonight that we move through the committees that require appointments, have recommendations placed forward for enactment in a bylaw prior to the end of the year. So if we can just move through the report, I'll outline what has to happen with each committee and which members currently serve or which members of the public are interested in maintaining their seat on these committees. So first we have our Police Services Board. As per the Police Services Act, in municipalities that are smaller than 25,000 people, the board is made of 3 members, being the board, a provincial appointee, and a citizen appointee. I have contacted both the provincial appointee and the citizen appointee, and they both wish to extend their time on the Police Services Board beyond 2018 throughout the remainder of the council duration. So that would bring us to 2022 for those appointees. Next, we have our Owen Sound and North Grey Union Public Library Board. As per the Public Libraries Act, you have to have 1 council member and 1 citizen member. We appointed 1 citizen member in 2018, who has also expressed great interest in remaining on her seat at this committee. In 2018, as you're aware, and as is reflected in this chart, we appointed Councillor Ryan Thompson to sit on said committee. Next, we have the Grey Sauble Conservation Authority Board. As per the Conservation Authorities Act, you have to appoint 2 council members. In 2018, Mayor Dwight Burley and Deputy Mayor Sue Carlton were appointed to said committee. We are required by the Building Code Act to have a Property Standards Committee. They meet anytime we have a property standards appeal to an order that has been placed on any property. That is required to be made up of 3 citizen members. All 3 of those citizen members have indicated their interest in remaining on this board until 2022. Next, we have our Committee of Adjustment, and I know that there was discussion in 2018 regarding amending our processes for Committee of Adjustment, as a large portion of municipalities do not have their council form Committee of Adjustment. Unfortunately, I am not happy to say that nothing has happened on that front. So for now, all of council will continue to make up Committee of Adjustment. If there's still an appetite to reform Committee of Adjustment, then that's something we can look at for sure, in coordination with our planning department, of course. So what we would look at would be bringing in members of the community to sit on Committee of Adjustment along with certain members of council. But should we move forward with that amendment, then we will revisit our appointment bylaw at said time. Next, we have our Source Protection Committee. In 2019, we appointed a community member with the City of Owen Sound to said committee, so we don't need to touch that. That one's fine. So now we have our local boards and advisory committees. These, for example, the Biodigester Joint Board, as per the existing terms of reference of said board, the mayor and the deputy mayor of both respective municipalities are required to sit on that board. So that one doesn't need amending either. We have our Shallow Lake Village Improvement Board, and I will admit that this board will have to be addressed separately, especially when it comes to community appointments in our appointment bylaw. I have reached out to the board, but have had not a lot of success in contacting our members. So I think we have to treat this one separately from our appointment bylaw this year and see if we can have any interest from our community members in remaining on the board, or if we have to repost, or if we need to revisit the board altogether, which I'm also open to. Okay, we're getting to the end, guys, don't worry. Next, we have our Inter-Township Fire Department Board of Management. As per the existing terms of reference, the mayor and deputy mayor and 1 member of council are to sit on said board. And as I mentioned, it may be that we end our negotiations in 2021, but it may be that we end our negotiations in time for the beginning of 2021, but if we don't, we should still appoint members to the board just in case. We have a Grey County Farm Safety Association, that's 1 council member, and in 2018 we appointed Councillor Paul Sutherland. We have a newly created Climate Action Team, That is made up of 5 community members and 2 council members, being Deputy Mayor Sue Carlton and Councillor Kathy Moore-Coburn. And finally, we have the Physician Recruitment Committee, which, as we know, has taken a new form. And I know we wanted to discuss whether or not we wanted to even maintain membership on said boards. We can have those discussions tonight, or we can relook at that committee at another time, open to whatever. But as you know, Councillor Thompson is currently appointed to said committee. So further to the recommendation, I am recommending that the public appointments, as I've outlined in this report, remain. So that would be for the Police Services Board, the Owen Sound and North Grey Library Board, as well as the Property Standards Committee. We do need to appoint council members to the Owen Sound and North Grey Union Public Library Board, the Grey Sauble Conservation Authority Board, the Inter-Township Fire Department Board of Management, and the Grey County Farm Safety Association. And it is up to council if we want to appoint a member to the Shallow Lake Village Improvement Board tonight, as well as the Physicians Recruitment Committee. So I'm hopeful that we can have some direction provided to myself as to which member is going to sit on which board, so we can formalize these appointments in a bylaw.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. Do you want to start off with the North Grey Library first? Councillor Thompson, you presently sit on that board with a lot of knowledge. Do you want to continue being on that board?
I'm happy to stay. I appreciate your glowing recommendation, and I'm blushing if you could see me closer, but I'm happy to stay. Having said that, if someone's really interested or passionate about it, I'm also willing to talk to them about a trade. So I'll leave that there.
Thank you. Deputy Mayor Carlton.
Just a comment on the library board. In my memory, under the Library Act, when you're appointed to that board, you're there for the 4-year council term. I seem to remember that from before, and I think Grey Sauble looks at theirs the same way, that when you're appointed, you're on for the term.
I can look into that. I did not see that in the legislation, but I can look into it.
I think the reasoning behind it is it saves on retraining of committee members, so you do a turnover every election.
Yeah, Madam Clerk, I do remember that very thing about Sauble Conservation Board, and I concur with the Deputy Mayor. I think we should look at it. If that is the case, the Mayor and the Deputy Mayor should stay on that committee. We look at it at a future time.
I will confirm both, and I'll prepare a draft bylaw that puts together all of the appointments we're going to talk about tonight and present that for enactment. And at that time, I will address these 2 committees as well.
Thank you. The Shallow Lake Improvement, do you want to just leave that until a separate discussion?
So I would like to open the discussion as well. Does council still have an interest in maintaining the Shallow Lake Village Improvement Board, or do we want to get into that discussion, or do we want to appoint a council member to this board and then see what happens in 2021 and see if we have to go for a recruit on public members?
Madam Treasurer, go ahead for interim CEO.
Thank you. I think we need a little bit more information on this. So first, I think we need to see, this was an award kind of more so established by the community as opposed to council. So I think we need to reach out to those community members and see if there's still an interest. If there is, I do think that they need to make a presentation to council and let us know what their goals and objectives are. I mean, this board was established specifically for the one reason, being the signs in Shallow Lake. So I think before we talk about appointments, first of all, we need to see if there's the community interest to still have it. We need to see what their goals are, and then see if it's still necessary for them to operate as a board, given their goals.
Good comments, Madam CEO. If that's okay with council, we'll go ahead, Madam Clerk. So we're down to the Inter-Township Fire Department Board. It's a very up in the air committee right at this present time. I would suggest strongly to council that the present members are sitting on this to stay until we find out what's going to happen in the future. If we find that there is a stage, or at that time, reopen it up, and maybe at that time put on new members if wished. But I'm suggesting strongly that we leave it the way it is for now. I don't know if that council agrees with that or not. In other words, me sitting on this chair, if Mayor Carlton and Councillor Colburn sit on that Untitled Fire Board at this present time. Councillor Pringle.
Yeah, I think in the situation that we're in right now, I think that would be the right way to go, because it could be 2 months, could be a year, who knows what it's going to take to do it. But if you three of them have been involved, I would personally say that that's the right decision to stay on.
Thank you, Councillor Pringle. Madam Clerk, you have that for now.
Yep.
Green County Farm Safety Association, it's quite unique that Councillor Sullivan's not here tonight, so I would think Councillor should definitely appoint him to that Farm Safety Committee. And he's really probably the most experienced councillor to sit on that committee. I don't know what council's thoughts are on that, but that's my thoughts. See no opposition to that. I think that's,
Unless somebody else wants to fight him for the job.
unless Councillor Colbert, do you want to stay on that committee?
No, despite my potato and beef farming roots, I don't. But I do wonder if we need to be entertaining other people's desires and wishes rather than just assuming things should stay the same way. I think although there's value in continuity, there's also value in a fresh set of eyes and new learning opportunities for council members who might want to try something different.
I agree with that. The only reason why Councillor Colbert and I suggested that the Untitled Fire Board stay the way it is just for a short term to see that maybe towards the end of the year we can find out what's actually going to happen with that board. If we take over sole ownership of the fire department, the board will probably disappear. So that's the only reason why I said that. Madam Clerk, have you got everything you need for this motion?
Yes, so following our discussion, we will remove Shallow Lake Village Improvement Board from this motion pending additional information, because we're not going to appoint anyone. And sitting here thinking, the bylaw that we passed appointing members only passed appointed members to the Library Board and the Grace Hall Authority Board for 2 years. So regardless, we have to reappoint you anyway. So we'll leave those as a part of it. Okay? So we're going to amend the motion to remove Shallow Lake Village Improvement Board pending more information and pending a potential presentation from said board. And I also just wanted to clarify that all of council is okay with our community member appointments on those 3 committees that I had mentioned carrying over.
Yes, I do not have a problem. Councillor Colbert, did I see your hand up?
Yeah, I'm not saying that I have an issue with it at all, Mr. Mayor. Because this is still relatively new to me, I'm not sure which positions that we're talking about here with the community representation are paid positions and which are volunteer. But there is part of me that wonders if we shouldn't be putting it out there to the general ratepayer group to see if there are other people who are interested in those positions. I'm always in favor of including as many different voices and players at the table as we can. These appointments were made for 2 years for a reason. And I guess I'm just wondering, is this standard practice to extend their term for another 2 years because they're requesting so? And might that disadvantage other ratepayers who might have an interest in becoming more involved in council business?
Good comments. I guess it's up to council as a whole if we want to ask the clerk to advertise for these public appointments or go with the appointees we have. Councillor Barber, are you trying to say something?
I just was going to ask a question. Did Brittany say that, or did you say that the Conservation Board always remains for the 4 years for a full term of council?
We're going to look into that and get back to council.
Well, because I was just thinking back, like we used to have Councillor Gay on it, and then after 2 years, that changed. I just wondered why they're not changing it. I don't want anything, don't get me wrong. I'm just saying, I think fresh eyes brings fresh perspective.
Councillor Bartlett, you're correct in what you're saying. Speaking to the Sauville Conservation Board, when the board members first got on there 2 years ago, they did take in-house training for to sit on the board to find everything they possibly could about Sauville Conservation and so on and so forth. That was the reason why I think it was made for the 2 years or 4 years. But again, let's check it out and we'll get back and move forward from there. Madam CEO.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Councillor Coburn had a question about paid positions and public participation. So on a lot of those boards, the positions are paid. So we do pay the meeting rate for the police services board members, the library board members, property standards, the Shadow Lake Village Improvement, the community members are not paid, that is volunteers. The one comment I would make is the Property Standards Board does not meet that often. They're only called upon when someone appeals a property standards order. So those people on that board really have only gathered 1 or 2 times in the last 2 years. So I wonder if we should allow them to continue the remaining 2 years, as they really haven't gotten the opportunity to do a lot of work on that board as of yet.
Thank you for those comments. Deputy Mayor Carl.
2 comments. It's been my experience in the past when we've advertised for residents to sit on those boards, it's been really hard to get people to step up and be willing to do it. So we're probably best to stay with the people that we do have in place at this point for this term of council. The other committee that we had talked about goes with our Rec and Trails Master Plan, and we had talked about getting a committee in place once that master plan is no longer draft, and including some residents and council on that one. So is that one we should have on the list now or leave it till later?
Go ahead, Cassie.
Thank you. That committee has not been formally established by council. So I believe that if that's council's wish that you want to establish a committee, you should direct staff to prepare a report. In that report, we would identify terms of reference. I do think, implementing that Rec and Trails Master Plan is the responsibility of staff, and that council, has an oversight role to make sure that those recommendations are in place should you want to do them. So I kind of question, what the role of a Rec and Master Plan Committee would be, and that's why further discussion is needed to define terms of reference.
So am I hearing you right, Madam Interim CEO, that you are going to bring a report back on that very committee?
No. What I'm saying is if council wants that committee, direct us to bring back a report. So far, I've heard of one councillor wanting that, but I need direction from council as a whole.
Madam Interim CEO, I would like to put a direction to you from council, if council's approval, that you bring back a report to council outlining terms of reference for that committee. Carol, go ahead. Councillor Bartlett.
Councillor Barfoot, you are muted.
Sorry. So the Katie Arena Board, that is out totally? Like, are we going to have any financial participation in that in the future, or is it by participant? And what about the doctor recruitment committee?
Okay,
Thompson still want that? Sorry, Ryan.
Councillor Barfoot, I'll let the interim CEO answer.
Thank you. Councillor Barfoot, the Katy Arena Board has been disbanded. Chatsworth has taken over operations of the Katy Arena, so there is no longer a board. For the physician recruitment committee, I also suggest that we get more information. At Councillor Thompson's last meeting, I think they were still deciding on how they were going to move forward as a committee and what that looks like. So I think we do need to talk to them to see if they even want our representation. Is that fair to say, Councillor Thompson? Because I didn't get a clear sense that they know how they're moving forward.
Don't get me wrong, Councillor Thompson. I don't want it. You're doing a good job.
Yeah, that's okay. I just want to make sure I reflect their information. So they definitely want representation. When we met last time, we talked about, do we want to be represented on the committee? So they're really clear. They want representation. They have a lot of energy right now, and they're really starting to sort of form their own association. The question is, do we want to commit to having a member be part of the committee? I'm happy to stay. Again, if somebody has a real passion and they want to be part of it, I'm also happy to have that conversation with people too. I think really what my colleagues need to decide are, do we feel like it's worth the investment?
Madam, you want to make a comment? You seem to indicate you want to get more information first.
No, I misunderstood the conversation. So Ryan, Councillor Thompson says they'd like representatives, so it's up to council to decide if you want to remain on that board.
Okay, Madam Clerk, is this part of your motion, or will be?
We will amend. So in the last few paragraphs of my report, I make reference to this. So we have to decide if we want to stay on this committee or not. So we can make that decision here tonight, and it can be reflected in your appointment bylaw, or we can not. So if we do so, we will amend the motion to include the physician recruitment committee. And if that member is Councillor Ryan Thompson, then the appointment bylaw will reflect so.
Thank you. I believe the two members, Councillor Colbert and Councillor Ryan Thompson, were both sitting on that committee for a while. Councillor Thompson's been there longer.
If I may, Mr. Mayor, it's currently just Councillor Thompson. I think Councillor Moore-Colburn simply sat in as an information for herself or as potential for future appointment to the committee, but it's just Councillor Thompson.
I can fill in some blanks there for you, Mr. Mayor, if you'd like.
Go ahead.
So when I brought that forward and gave an update to council, I think that one of us, or like somebody suggested, maybe Councillor Colburn's nursing background would be helpful on the committee, and that's fine. We left it that I would introduce that as a potential to the committee, and then in a subsequent conversation with Councillor Colburn, and I won't speak for Councillor Colburn, but I think we decided let's wait until we have this conversation to decide A, if we're going to switch it up, and B, if we're going to continue representation. So that's my input.
Thank you, Councillor Thompson. Councillor Colbert, any comments? Councillor Colbert, go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So I would say that I think we probably need to evaluate or have Ryan further evaluate the value of sitting on the physician recruitment committee before we make any changes. So I'll step aside from that. I just want to refer to Cassie's comment about the Rec and Trails master plan. I totally concur with our interim CAO that to me, this seems like we've done our work as council. We've provided the broad policy. They have that or will have that once that's finalized. And I would recommend we hand that over to staff to implement. That's my opinion on that one. I would be interested in the library board, to be perfectly honest, but I don't want to take that away from Councillor Thompson. And given that I'm already on the Climate Action Committee, that is having that one committee is probably sufficient. I'm off the wind turbine working group, and I suspect I'll be off the Intertownship Fire Department board fairly soon as well. My final comment is going to bring us back to the community representation. I do recall having several applications for community reps on the police board. Given that that's a paid position, I'm not sure about the, I don't want us to hand that over to our current reps, though I suspect they're doing a wonderful job just because they've said they want to, especially given that it's a paid position. I don't want there to be any sense or perception of impropriety. So I would recommend, my opinion is that we don't extend that we put those out for the larger community to apply and accept those applications. I wonder if we needed to separate this motion into two bits, one concerning the community representation piece and extension or not, and the other being the appointment of council representatives on the various committees.
Madam Clerk, go ahead.
If I may, in order to refrain from separating the motions, Councillor Coburn, you could move to amend the motion to remove the community, or not remove, but that community member appointments be advertised for completion in 2021 or for filling vacancies in 2021. If you wanted to move that motion and there was a seconder, then we could vote on the amendment.
Madam Clerk, the Police Service Board, the provincial appointment is by the province.
That is correct, yes.
So that is fixed.
It is, yeah, it would just be the community appointee being Mary Hatt. No, sorry, Peter Hughes.
And the provincial appointment, the mayor sits on that committee.
Correct.
So the only one we're talking about is our present member, Peter Hughes, which is a public member.
Correct.
So Councillor Coburn, are you wanting to amend it so that that position is advertised? Go ahead.
I'm sorry, Mr. Mayor, it's cutting in and out for me and I apologize. So I'm only catching bits and pieces, but did I understand you to say that our only rep on the Police Service Board is Mr. Hughes? Because I thought that was Mr. Hatt as well.
Mr. Hatt is our provincial appointee. He's appointed by the province for the term of council. And the provincial mandate says that mayor must sit on that committee. So the only one we are questioning is our public member, Mr. Peter Hughes.
So is that the position that we had several applications for then, or am I confused?
Madam Clerk, go ahead.
So when we were advertising for the Police Services Board, it does fall to the municipality to find provincial appointee, what's the word I'm looking for? Provincial appointee people as well. And then we send them to the province to make the final appointment. But we have to choose both of those committee appointees at that time.
Yeah, that's correct, Madam Clerk, but I believe that the appointee is good for a term of council, the provincial appointee.
That is correct. So we would just be replacing the community appointee. So I do have to say that this is the first term of council that is proposing switch-ups. So in past terms of council, we've appointed people to committees and they have held that position for the entirety of the council term. So I think the entire reasoning behind these scheduled renewed appointments was because of the former standing committees, being the Operations Committee and the Corporate Services, Finance and Building Committees. I think in order to best preserve our committee structure as it is, I would recommend leaving community appointments the same as as Deputy Mayor Carlton has said earlier in this meeting. There is a lot of training that goes along with community appointees, and these members, you know, they're in their groove and they all have really enjoyed their experience and would really like to carry it on. I think our committee structure can be further amended to include new committees or what have you, and we can look at that in the new year. That would involve more community participation. But I think the current structure that we have with our public appointees is working. So I think that changing it, in my opinion, is relatively unnecessary because, as I said, our community people are really enjoying their time. And as Cassie had previously said, these boards don't meet on a regular basis, so they really haven't had a lot of experience. So that's my 2 cents.
Thank you, Madam Clerk, for those great comments. Is there any other comments from any council member? See none, Madam Clerk, so we'll vote on the motion.
So before we call the vote, I just want to make sure that everybody knows what we're voting on right now. So I have amended the motion to exclude Shallow Lake Village Improvement Board. We will deal with that separately. We'll get more information and potentially a presentation from the board and then relook at it altogether. I have not included physician recruitment. Do we have a will of council to include physician recruitment at this time?
I felt that council wanted to get more information just so we're very clear on why we need to have a member there. That's my interpretation of our conversation. Would you agree to that, Councillor Colbert?
Thompson.
Councillor Colbert, do you agree with my comments?
Are you talking to me, sir? Because I don't think I disagreed with that in the beginning. I think maybe you're referring to Councillor Thompson, perhaps?
Councillor Colbert, you make the comment that maybe we needed to have more information on the doctor recruitment committee before we make any decision what member to sit on there. That's what I was referring to. And I believe you felt more information. That's why I pinpointed you out. Okay?
Yeah, sorry, Mr. Mayor, that's absolutely correct. But I think I will defer to Councillor Thompson on that matter.
Councillor Thompson, go ahead.
I'm happy to get more. I'm happy to go back to the group. I just don't want to disappoint council because I don't know if there's more information to get really. They're working on developing a committee that's going to try and be a bit more aggressive in their pursuit of physicians, but I don't know if there's more information to get. I think we need to make a decision if we want membership on the committee or not. I think it's a simple decision. I can try and I can ask the group questions if we have particular questions, but basically what they want to know, I think, is do they have a partner if they have physicians on the hook or not?
Okay, Councillor Pringle.
Personally, I think if we're trying to make a lot of things happen in the peninsula with the airport and possible hotel being built there, and I think for us to have a representative on this recruitment team is really a small price for us to pay to have somebody there. But did you go 2 or 3 times a year, Ryan? Do you go 2 or 3 times a year?
It's monthly, so it's the first week of the month. So it roughly costs us. They take some time off. It roughly costs us. I'm going to throw a number out. It's about $1,000 a year.
To me, just to have that extra communication, I think is a good piece to have, and I think Ryan probably does a really good job of doing it.
Here's another option. The group is scheduling an opportunity for to come before council and explain what they're up to. Why don't I maintain my membership until we hear from the group, and then we can make a decision after we hear from them?
That sounds like a very good solution to our problem. Councilor Coburn, do you agree with that?
Councillor Coburn has her hand raised.
No. Councilor Barker, go ahead.
Sorry, Kathy, I meant Carol.
Sorry, Mr. Mayor, through you. Brittany, did you say that never in the past have we changed committees after 2 years? Did I understand that right?
So you've never changed community appointees after 2 years? In the last term of council?
No, the term before, because I used to sit on the fire board. I sat on the fire board for 2 years. I sat on wind turbine for 2 or 3 years. So in the past, it has been done if a councillor, and I don't want any committees, but if a councillor had a particular interest, it's good to sort of bring new councillors on, shall I say.
Thank you for your comments. Deputy Mayor Carlton.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to Councillor Barfoot. I think what Brittany was talking about, Carol, was our community appointees, not the council appointees. That we don't traditionally change our community appointees to those committees partway through the term.
I was talking about council committees.
Okay, thank you, Carol. Madam Clerk, I'll turn it over to you again on this motion.
Thank you. So upon hearing this discussion, I think it is best to include physician recruitment for now. The worst thing that happens is we reappoint a member to the physician recruitment committee, and then we leave the committee following their presentation to council. But for now, we have to renew the appointment because it will expire in 2022. So if that presentation doesn't happen until midway through 2021, or sorry, I'm getting my years confused. It's been a long week. So we have to renew the appointment for 2021 to ensure our membership is continued. So I have amended this motion to include the physician recruitment committee. Okay?
Okay.
So that's our second amendment to this motion. We amended it to remove the Shadow Lake Village Improvement Board and include the physician recruitment committee.
Okay.
Now, the minutes will reflect the appointments we have discussed here tonight to said committees, being pending confirmation of the legislation, Councillor Ryan Thompson to the Owen Sound and North Grey Union Public Library Board. Should the legislation say or not include that appointment is effective for the full term of council, then we can have another discussion if another council member is interested in representing the township on said board. Grey Stouffville Conservation Authority Board, the same. For now, it will remain as the mayor and the deputy mayor pending confirmation of the legislation, which I will provide an update to council at the next meeting. The Inter-Township Fire Department Board of Management will remain the same, being the mayor, deputy mayor, and Councillor Kathy Moore-Coburn. The Grey County Farm Safety Association will remain the same as Councillor Paul Sutherland, and the Physician Recruitment Committee will remain the same as Councillor Ryan Thompson. So, the motion will read, and through you, Mr. Chair, that council hereby appoints members to township committees and boards as follows: Owen Sound and North Grey Union Public Library Board, Grey Stouffville Conservation Authority Board, Inter-Township Fire Department Board of Management, Grey County Farm Safety Association, and that community member appointments be extended to 2022, and that a bylaw to formalize committee appointments be presented for consideration at the December 2nd, 2020 council meeting.
Madam Clerk, did you say the doctor recruitment? You did?
If I didn't, then please include the physician
Okay.
recruitment committee.
I just want to make sure I do not remember saying it, but okay. If that's okay with council, we had a great discussion on this. All in favor of the motion as presented? It's carried. I've not seen any response from, okay, thank you, it's carried. Moving on to our agenda. Our next recommendation, that the Council of the Township of Georgian Bluffs approves the hiring of Andrew Kibble to remove snow on the south section of Francis Drive for the 2020-21 winter season at a cost of $12,000 plus HST, and that sanding service be provided on an on-call basis at a cost of $225 plus tax per trip. Someone to move to put on the floor, please. Moved by Deputy Mayor Carlton, second by Councilor Pringle. Intern CEO, you want to comment on this?
Yes, thank you. So back in June 2019, Council agreed to assume Francis Drive from north of Concession 14 to the 1 foot reserve that we just recently took ownership of. So as you are aware, we've done a lot of work in that area, removing trees and stumps to widen the road. The previous director of operations felt that once those trees were down and removed and cleaned up, that we would be able to drive a single axle plow truck down that road to remove the snow. In conversations with the current road supervisor, he does not feel that is possible due to the base of the road being too narrow. So more improvements need to be done on that road before we are able to use our equipment to maintain it. So I reached out to the contractor who has been removing the snow on that road for the last 8 years. He was hired by the association to do the snow removal. Due to timing constraints, I contacted him and asked him for a quote to continue with the snow removal for 2020-2021 winter season. That's provided in front of you. I will note that we have not formally assumed this road as of yet. We are waiting to have a survey done to make sure that the traveled portion of the road does fall within the road allowance. So council has not formally assumed this road, but you did pass a motion agreeing to take over maintenance prior to the winter season, which is why I'm suggesting we hire a contractor to do the winter maintenance.
Thank you, Madam CEO. You're saying that there was a motion of the council passed to do maintenance on that section of the road?
Correct, and it's included in that report.
Yeah, okay. Does council have any questions on the motion before us? Seeing none, all in favor of the motion? It is carried. Thank you. We are now down to public question period. Madam Clerk, do we have anyone on public question period?
Yes, we do, and just give me 1 second, I'm going to get them in the meeting. So we have one participant in public question period this evening, being Mark Swanson. Mark Swanson is on the line with us. Mark, please go ahead.
Yes, can you hear me satisfactorily?
Yes, we can, Mark.
Okay. Mr. Mayor and councilmen and councilwomen, I am a resident of Francis Lake. I live on Francis Drive East, and was also on the executive of the Big Rock Home and Cottage Association. That association was largely established many years ago with the duties of road repair, maintenance, and snow removal on Big Rock Road and Francis Drive East. In that capacity, I was also involved with multiple communications and meetings with Rick Winters dating back to August the 13th, 2018, and particularly a meeting in July 2019, which was prompted by the approval of Georgian Bluffs of the assumption of Francis Drive West, and I think that took place in June 2019. Further to that meeting, Rick attended our annual meeting August 31st, 2019 to address our issues on the assumption of Big Rock Road and Francis Drive East to Spencer Avenue. In that meeting, he conveyed, process, protocol, and a number of mechanics, but clearly indicated Georgian Bluffs would be taking responsibility for snow removal the winter of 2020/2021. Big Rock Road Home and Cottage Association looked after the maintenance and snow removal 2019-2020 in keeping with its usual mandate. Following the departure of Rick, there was a fairly significant communication gap, and we finally were able to link up with Tyler Yankee, and arranged to have a meeting with Tyler on February the 4th, 2020, to talk about the assumption process of Big Rock Road and Francis Drive to Spencer Avenue. In that outdoor meeting, which took place on Spencer Avenue, Tyler did indicate that Georgian Bluffs would be looking after the winter road maintenance and plowing for the season of 2020-2021. This meeting was also attended by Mayor Burley, whom you can consult subsequent to my discussions about the content, I'm sure. After an extended gap of communication again, after that February 4th meeting, I was finally able to hook up with Tyler for written confirmation of discussions in our February 4th meeting, in which Tyler asserted Georgian Bluffs would look after the winter maintenance and snow plowing for Big Rock Road and Francis Drive to Spencer Avenue. Now, my email to Tyler indicated, further to previous discussions and meetings, kindly confirm Georgian Bluffs will be responsible for winter maintenance and snow removal for subject roads. The reference line to subject roads is Big Rock Road, Francis Drive to Spencer Avenue. I indicated we require this confirmation in order to advise residents of the Cottage Association that we will not make arrangements for road snow removal the winter of 2021, as this was being taken over by Georgian Bluffs. And they will have to make arrangements for their own driveway snow removal for that winter. I sent that email to Tyler August 23rd. Tyler responded on August 25th, and he copied Mayor Burley and also John Norton, who I believe has also departed. And Tyler responded as follows: "Hello, Mark. I will do a final walkthrough of site to look for deficiencies. With that complete, we will begin the assumption process. Yes," and I italicize this, "yes, the township will be completing the winter maintenance this year. I'm not just certain if we will be doing it or have to contract it. The matter becomes a little more complicated with the assumption of Francis Lake Road to the south." Now, following that, we believe that we had a confirmation that Big Rock Road and Francis Drive East was going to be maintained and looked after by Big Rock Road, by Georgian Bluffs. We then communicated to our association members in our, a newsletter that we wouldn't be arranging for the winter snow removal on Big Rock Road and Francis Drive East, and that they'd have to make arrangements for their own driveways to be, looked after for snow removal, and that Georgian Bluffs was responsible for the road snow removal. Now, unbeknown to us, and we just discovered recently that apparently Georgian Bluffs changed their position on their responsibility for snow removal on Big Rock Road and Francis Drive East. And we are also not even provided the courtesy of a communication that apparently Georgian Bluffs had changed their position on this. This was upsetting to us because we essentially just dissolved our association on the basis of Tyler confirming that they would be looking after the road. The association mandate was to look after the road. Well, with Georgian Bluffs taking responsibility for snow removal, there really wasn't much point to continue the association. So our position really is that Georgian Bluffs committed without qualification to winter snow removal for 2020-2021 by virtue of Tyler's confirmation that they would do so, and Georgian Bluffs should honor that pledge and that commitment. The refusal to do so, should they elect to take that position, is, there's a lot of safety issues, there are insurance issues for residents due to access by way of Big Rock Road. There's liability concerns related, to access issues for emergency service in the vehicles via Big Rock Road and Francis Drive East. I'd also remind the council that Big Rock Road is also the primary conduit for residents to bring their children up for school bus pickup at County Road 17 and Big Rock Road. So I guess our position really is Georgian Bluffs needs to, step up here and honor their commitment and make this right, and confirm again that they'll be looking after the winter maintenance of Big Rock Road and Francis Drive East. And I'd also note that they actually provided grading during the summer and fall to these roads. So there's no doubt that the commitments there for the assumption of Big Rock Road and Francis Drive East, that's not the issue. But aside from the obvious that Georgian Bluffs through Tyler committed to the winter maintenance, why should the residents, taxpayers on Big Rock Road and Francis Drive be burdened at this stage with financial cost to make alternate arrangements for snow removal on Big Rock Road and Francis Drive East? I mean, that's just frankly unfair, and we could use different words to describe it. So in summary, I guess I'm saying to Georgian Bluffs, you need to step up here, do what's right, honor your commitment. And I appreciate that you guys have had a terrible year with turnover and a lot of confusion related to, things going on at this lake. But that doesn't change the fact that that commitment was made. And I think Georgian Bluffs needs to step up and honor the commitment. So that's all I have to say on it. We really do need to know what Georgian Bluffs intends to do, because, we need to know where we're going from here.
Thank you, Mark. I think you've got your point across. Before I turn it over to the CEO to comment, I want to make a couple comments. I was invited out to that site that day by our Director of Operations, Paul Yankee, at the time. I did listen to the conversation.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So first of all, current staff were not aware or made aware of any emails or any communications that had taken place between Mr. Yonke and Mr. Swanson. Secondly, it's not up to a director to commit to assuming a road or any maintenance of a road without approval of council. Only council can decide to assume a road, and it has to be done by bylaw. When you assume that road, you assume the maintenance of the road. That discussion for that section has never taken place at the council level. Secondly,
May I respond to that?
I'm still speaking.
Just a minute, Mark. We'll give you a chance after she's finished with her comments.
The Big Rock Road and Spencer Avenue are part of a development agreement. Under that agreement, the developer is responsible for maintenance of the road until such a time as we assume it. So we have not formally assumed that road yet. We did reach out to the developer and say, we feel we're ready to assume the road. We have not heard back from them, which is why it has not come forward to council at this time to be assumed.
Go ahead, Mark. You want to respond to one of the comments?
Absolutely. I would say that your arrangements and agreements with the developers, particularly on Spencer, that are involved with us, it's not our responsibility as taxpayers and residents to hold the Georgian Bluffs feet to the fire to make sure that that process takes place in a timely manner, in a cooperative manner. We have an email from Tyler indicating that you've committed to the maintenance of the road. It's not our problem. This is your problem, Georgian Bluffs, between you and the developer. And, I worked in business for 35 years with a large institutional employer. And if I committed to something, the institution was committed by that commitment. Tyler wasn't just some guy working on the road. He was the interim CAO, I guess. And, whether he had the authority to make that commitment or not, he did make that commitment. And Georgian Bluffs should stand by that commitment and do the right thing and take care of this road for this winter. And we don't care whether you do it or you contract it to be done. What we do care is we have a commitment from Georgian Bluffs, be it from Tyler, that they will do this. Now you've changed your position. We're not involved with the developers. We're not involved with that project. We can only be guided by what we're told by Georgian Bluffs. And, unfortunately, Tyler's no longer there. I would love it if he was available to discuss this, but he did make the commitment. And you have it in writing there. And you can say to me as many times as you wish, well, it's the developers and they haven't completed this and we haven't assumed it yet. I don't care. That's not our problem. That's your problem.
Thank you, Mark. I'm going to let the CEO comment, and then I'm going to comment. Go ahead, Cassie.
So I guess my biggest comment would be any arrangements made between the former director of operations and the Francis Drive Association were not communicated to any current staff. So I keep on saying this to council. I can't fix what I don't know, right? So I didn't know that this commitment was made. I wrote my report about doing the winter maintenance from concession 14 to the 1 foot reserve. And then I received a call, I believe on yesterday or Monday, from Mr. Swanson letting me know that these arrangements are being made, or that Tyler had committed to doing that winter maintenance. So I'm just presenting the facts to council here tonight. But I do caution that we have not assumed the road, and it is the developer's responsibility per the agreement for the maintenance.
Thank you, Cassie.
Yes, you continue to repeat that theme, and you missed the point here.
Okay, thanks, Mark.
That is, George and Bluff's committed to this, and they should honor it.
Thanks, Mark. Now it's my turn. Tyler Yankee was the director of operations for the municipality. Tyler did make a commitment by sending an email out, although he didn't have council permission to do it. We, as a council, need to have a real good discussion about this whole matter. Yes, the staff that are in place now probably didn't know anything about the commitment that Tyler made. I'm not going to run down a former employee. He's no longer with the municipality, but I will say that maybe there's a lot of things that should have been done that weren't done at that time, and that's why we're in this position. I really need Mark, thank you for bringing it to our attention. I really think council as a whole needs to have a conversation about this, and I think we'll get back to you with what we can come up with the solution. I have had a conversation with the owners of that subdivision, Mike Smart and Jim McKinnon. They understand that they are holding the township up to assume that road. They did assure me today that they will have the proper stuff to the clerk in place by the end of the week, and hopefully they will. I really think we need to have a conversation as a council, and we will get back to you. And I can really appreciate the predicament you're in, but we need to have a conversation as a council.
I thank you for that. We have no intention of arranging the snow removal for Big Rock Road and Francis Drive East, because the association was dissolved based on the communications that George and Bluffs would be responsible for snow removal. We need to know what your position is as soon as possible, in order that we can determine what our next actions will be.
Mark, I assure you, you will have a response back from council very soon. It'll come from staff, but I really think council as a whole needs to have a conversation about this. And
I agree.
Thank you very much for your comments. We'll take it into consideration here and have a conversation. Thank you, Mark.
Thank you.
Madam Clerk, we'll move on to the agenda and come back to this.
Does council want to discuss it now, or do you want to add it as an item under new business?
I think we should add it under new business, Sunny.
Okay.
If that's
Clerk, are
okay.
you okay with that? A late addition to the agenda? Okay, we will add it, the discussion under new business.
Thank you. Council okay with that? I believe so. So let's move on to our agenda then. We're down to bylaws, none other bylaws.
Hi.
Okay, we're down to our first recommendation that the bylaw 2021-24 being a bylaw to authorize an assessment of lease hangar number 4 at the Martin Keppel International Airport, be read first, second, third time, finally passed, signed by the mayor, clerk, and sealed with the seal of the corporation endorsed on the bylaw book. Someone to move, put on the floor, please. Moved by Councillor Pringle, second by Deputy Mayor Carlton. Madam CEO, you want to speak to this?
Yes, thank you. So I just wanted to reiterate that one of our existing hangar leasees transferred their lease to another owner. So we're not extending the lease, we're not amending the lease, it's simply a transfer of the lease agreement with the same terms and conditions.
So I guess part of that lease agreement, Madam Interim CEO, is that he has to notify the towns to be doing that. That's why it's happening.
Yes, so originally he asked if we would support it, and my response was yes, because the new owner already owns a hangar at the airport. And then to formalize the arrangement is why you have this in front of you tonight.
Thank you. Does council have any questions on the motion before us? Seeing none, all in favor of the motion?
4.
It's carried. We're down to our next recommendation, the bylaw number 2025, bylaw number 2020-125, being a bylaw to authorize a source protection plan risk management agreement with Great Salt Conservation Authority to be read a first, second, third time, finally passed, signed by the mayor and clerk, sealed to seal the corporation, and endorsed in the bylaw book. Someone to move to put on the floor, please. Moved by Councillor Thompson, second by Councillor Bartlett. Any discussion on the motion before us? Madam Clerk, I need to ask you a question. We have a member appointed to the committee. I believe it's the city manager, city.
Yes, it is an employee of the city of Long Sound.
And does that affect that appointment?
No.
No, okay. Does council have any question on the motion before us? All in favor of the motion?
4.
It's carried. We're down to our next recommendation, that bylaw 2020-126 being the bylaw to assume Telford Trail to the municipal public highway system be read a first, second, third time, finally passed, signed by the mayor and clerk, sealed to seal the corporation, and endorsed in the bylaw book. Someone to move to put on the floor, please. Moved by Deputy Mayor Carlton, second by Councillor Coburn. Madam CEO, go ahead.
Thank you. This bylaw is to clean up a previous bylaw from 2018. So upon review of the bylaw where we assumed the roads in Cobble Beach, it was noted that we missed listing assuming Telford Trail. So that is what we're doing tonight.
Okay, thank you. Council, have any questions on the motion before us? Seeing none, all in favor of the motion?
4.
4.
Thank you. Carried. Our next recommendation is that bylaw 2020-128 being a bylaw to appoint and regulate off-road vehicles on municipal highways in the township of Georgian Bus, and repeal bylaw 27-2016 be read a first, second, third time, finally passed, signed by the mayor and clerk, and sealed the corporation, endorsed in the bylaw book. Someone to move to put on the floor, please. Moved by Councillor Pringle, second by Deputy Mayor Carlton. Is there any discussion on the motion before us? All in favor of the motion?
4.
Councillor Thompson, I did not hear a reply.
Brian said Carol had her hand up.
Okay.
Kathy hasn't done anything.
Councillor Coburn, could you indicate your vote?
I'm sorry, Madam Clerk, I can't because I'm struggling with my sound. I believe we're having some issues here out in virtual land, and I did not hear the motion and I didn't hear the discussion. So I can, if it's okay, I'll just refrain from voting if that's a possibility.
So we can repeat the motion and call the vote again.
Thank you.
Mr. Mayor?
Okay, I'll repeat the motion again. Bylaw 2020-128 being a bylaw to permit regulated off-road vehicles on municipal highways in the township of Georgian Bluffs, and repeal bylaw 27-2016 be read a first, second, third time, finally passed, signed by the mayor and clerk, sealed with the seal of the corporation, and endorsed in the bylaw book. And Madam Clerk, I forgot who moved and seconded it.
Me too.
Deputy Mayor Carlton, or we'll say Councillor Pringle moved it, and Deputy Mayor Carlton seconded it. All in favor of the motion before us? Councillor
4.
Okay, thank you. It was carried.
Mr. Mayor, if I can just bring you back a step, we missed one bylaw, being bylaw 2021-27.
Oh, we did.
We did.
Sorry. Huh. Not funny. I have a recommendation here that bylaw 2021-27 being a bylaw to authorize a site plan agreement with Arnold Dean Senator and Sonia Gerald Dina Center be read a first, second, third time, finally passed, signed by the mayor and clerk, sealed and sealed the corporation, and endorsed in the bylaw book. Someone to move to put on the floor, please. Moved by Councillor Thompson, second by Councillor Colbert. Is there any discussion on the motion before us? All in favor of the motion?
For.
The motion is carried. We're down to unfinished business. Do we want to deal with these items on the list first, and then we'll pick up that last one? And then we'll be added at the very end?
It'll be added on new business, not on.
Oh, sorry, okay. We're down to unfinished business. Correspondence from the NEC Commission regarding snowmobile use on NEC lands. Madam Clerk, this was just for information.
Yes, so as previously requested and spoken about in council chambers, Councillor Kathy Moore Coburn specifically was looking for more information about what exactly permitted snowmobiles on NEC lands. So I reached out to the NEC to have this confirmation provided to us, and as you can see in the correspondence, the NEC has noted that as the OFSC trails were pre-existing to the NEP, being the Niagara Escarpment Plan, it is currently a permitted use.
Okay, thank you for that. So that's mainly for your information, Madam Clerk. Is there any?
Both Councillor Coburn and Councillor Barfoot have their virtual hands raised.
Okay, go ahead, Councillor Coburn.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Again, lots of cutting in and out, so I hope I've heard everything correctly. So this is in regards to the response from the NEC. The email, I had requested that because in a report brought forward earlier by our former director of operations, it seemed to indicate that there was some kind of formal agreement between the snowmobile clubs and the Niagara Escarpment Commission that allowed their use of the trails. So I had asked for that permit or memo of understanding, and I guess, Brittany, what this email says, or if I'm interpreting it correctly, is that there is no formal agreement, but that if it was an existing use, that they're essentially being grandfathered over. And the only question I have that I wonder if you can interpret for me is it says the majority of the snowmobile trails that traverse the NEC planning area. That's that choice of wording indicates to me that they're sort of crossing over rather than using an established trail, but that could just be semantic. So I wonder if you could clarify that particular point for me, if possible.
Madam Clerk, are you able to do that now?
Yes, and without trying to speak to the NEC's words and without misinterpreting the intention of his use of said word, to me, traverse is equivalent to meander. So whenever you are on or meandering through or traversing through NEC lands, then you are on a permitted OFSC trail. That is a permitted use, as those trails predate the Niagara Escarpment Plan. But with that being said, if you would like further clarification on the use of said word, we can definitely reach out to the NEC.
Is that okay, Councilor Colbert? Did you get an answer to your
Councillor Coburn, if I'm not breaking up, our IT department has indicated it may be your headphones that are resulting in your breaking of sound.
Hi, Brittany. Yeah, I've tried it with and without, and I get the same result both times. So I'll unplug again and see if that makes a difference, but it didn't seem to have. Leave the meeting early because I am missing a significant amount of what's being discussed, and I feel badly about that. I'm not really sure what's going on, but I understand Councillor Thompson might be having similar issues. So I will go back on mute, and thank you for bringing that correspondence back at my request. I appreciate that.
Councillor Barfoot, did I see your hand up?
No, you didn't.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Barfoot.
Mr. Mayor, can I just interject for a second?
Certainly can.
Councillor Thompson, are you struggling with your sound as well?
I'm okay. I'm okay right now. I can hear everybody's comments pretty clearly. I was experiencing some trouble 15 minutes ago.
Okay.
Okay, so we'll move forward. I have a recommendation here. Whereas council consider correspondence from the town of Oakville, specifically from Mayor Rob Burton at their meeting on November 4th, 2020, regarding a targeted approach to closures and restrictions as a result of COVID-19 pandemic. And whereas council acknowledges the impact widespread closures have on small and local businesses, and whereas the health and safety of Georgian Bluffs residents and those of the province of Ontario is the utmost priority of council and public officials. Now therefore, council, the township of Georgian Bluffs supports the town of Oakville and Mayor Rob Burton in the request for a targeted approach that is data-driven, backed by evidence, in order to maintain public support for public health guidance in place of a continued use of restrictions on geographic or blanketed basis in response to COVID-19 pandemic, and further that this motion and appended advisory letter be forwarded to the office of the Premier of Ontario in the town of Oakville. Someone to move to put it on the floor, please. Moved by Deputy Mayor Carlton, second by Councillor Thompson. Is there any discussion on the motion before us? Councillor Coburn.
I do have a comment, Mr. Mayor, but first, if you don't mind, since you're bringing this motion forward, I wonder if you could, I'm just wondering if you could clarify for us what it is that we're asking the, is it the Provincial Ministry of Health? What is it that we're asking them to do differently? It sort of reads like we're being asked to loosen restrictions, but I just want to be clear before I make a comment.
The intent of this supporting this motion, Councillor Coburn, was that I believe that in Grey Bruce counties, we handle the pandemic a little different than they do down in the GTA areas. And I really feel that we shouldn't be blanketed with the same pinpoint restrictions here in Grey Bruce as what they do down there. Madam CEO.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. To provide some clarity, this motion was presented to council, or this motion was presented to council before the province implemented the colored stages. So Deputy Mayor Carlton asked that, or made the notice of a motion for us to support the Mayor of Oakville's comments. In the meantime, the provincial government did implement a color-coded system that does not lock or blanket restrictions across the whole province. So I do feel that his concerns in this notice of motion have been addressed. And unfortunately, due to a bit of a time lag, now the notice of motion is being made to council.
You're very correct in what you're saying. You just said it more elegantly than I could. Deputy Mayor Carlton, since you brought the notice of motion forward, is there any comments?
I would agree with what the acting CAO has said, that when we brought this forward, it seemed to be pertinent. But in the meantime, the Premier of Ontario has gone to a color-coded system that really makes this motion actually rather redundant at this point. I noticed Councillor Coburn.
Go ahead, Councillor Coburn.
Yeah, not only do I concur that it's redundant because, as Deputy Mayor Carlton says, we're already using a targeted approach that is based on data and evidence. The medical experts are in fact saying that the thresholds are too high. And during this time, we're seeing more and more cases locally, provincially, and worldwide. So now would definitely not be the time to encourage anybody to be loosening restrictions. As much as we recognize how much our local businesses are suffering from this, I think there's a lot more at stake here.
Thank you. Councillor Barfoot, did I see your hand up?
Well, the deputy mayor and Councillor Coburn sort of stole my thunder. I had to read both letters 2 or 3 times and sit back and scratch my head and say, what are we saying? No, we cannot afford to relax anything. We've done well up until a couple weeks ago, and something's gone off the rails. The numbers are increasing every day. I agree with the mayor and Councillor Coburn. This letter is redundant. Scrap it.
Okay, Madam Clerk, do we ask the mover second to withdraw?
Correct. They may withdraw the motion.
So,
I'm agreeable to that.
okay, and Councillor Pringle, did you second that motion? Okay, and you agree to withdraw? Yeah, okay. The motion has been withdrawn, Madam Clerk. So we'll move on then. Our next notice of motion. A recommendation that whereas municipalities in Ontario are responsible for conducting fair and democratic elections of local representatives, and whereas the province of Ontario through Bill 218 support Ontario's Recovery and Municipal Elections Act 2020 is proposing changes to the Municipal Elections Act 1996 to extend nomination day from the end of July to the second Friday in September, and whereas the operation, financial, regulatory compliance of municipal elections are the sole responsibility of municipalities, and whereas local governments understand the need of local voters, election officials, and public officials, now therefore the Council of Towns of Georgian Bluffs hereby opposes the proposed amendment to the Municipal Elections Act 1996 as included in Bill 218, and that a copy of this motion be forwarded to the Ministry of Municipal Affairs and Housing, Ministry of the Attorney General, Offices of the Premier of Ontario, AMO, AMCTO, and all Ontario municipalities. Someone to move to put on the floor, please. Moved by Deputy Mayor Carlton, second by Councillor Pringle. Any discussion on the motion before us? Councillor Coburn, did I see your leg come on? Oh, Carol.
No, mine didn't come on, but given that you've offered me the opportunity, I won't pass it down. I like the motion. I support the motion. I would just encourage inclusion of the of being opposed to the amendment that removes municipalities' right to conduct ranked ballot votes, as discussed earlier. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Madam Clerk, I think that should be a separate motion, should it not?
No, I don't think it needs to be a separate motion. I think we just simply add a second line that says, so following the first line of the motion, so carrying on from July to the second Friday in September, and whereas Bill 218 also proposes to remove ranked ballot voting methods, and then carry on and so forth. So we have our specific reference to ranked ballot removal, You'll have to forgive me. It was my impression following the committee of the whole meeting that council was more specifically opposed to the amendments made to nomination day. So I made specific reference to that discussion that we had. But I think adding the second line also appropriately addresses the amendments to the ranked ballot system.
But Madam Clerk, that makes it very difficult if, for instance, say if I agree with the motion as read and do not agree with the add-on, it makes it very difficult to try and vote for that motion.
So simply put, and without being specific, we are opposing to Bill 218 in its entirety. So if we need to remove all of the specifics altogether, then we can definitely do that. But the intention of this motion is to say we oppose it in its completion, including ranked ballot voting.
Okay, I understand. Is there any other discussion by council? Seeing none, all in favor of the motion before us?
For.
Brian? Councillor Thompson, is there any for or against?
So Councillor Thompson will be marked as absent for this portion of the meeting.
Okay, Councillor Barfoot, for or against? Okay.
Wait, I'm here. You asked who was for, right?
For or against?
Oh, opposed. I heard you say who is for. My apologies.
Okay, the motion was carried. Moving on to our agenda, we're down to new business. So I think we'll take Councillor Barfoot, the discussion regarding the 2021 budget process. Councillor Barfoot, you have the floor.
Okay, I'll make this very brief. I think Owen Sound started this year saying council had input into what they want in the budget, and I know staff does a good job of doing it, but I would urge council, we're out there talking to ratepayers all over the township. I think we should have more input into the budget, and I don't like to see in the draft budget, yes, that process has to be open to the public. There's no doubt about that. But I hate to see us release any speculation such as, oh, the taxes are going to go down or whatever. Make any public statement before we get the budget sort of cast in stone. I was very nervous of the way it happened last year, and people right away, they just thought, oh, well, we're going to get a reduction in our taxes. Well, that didn't always happen. So I just, we should think a little differently. I do like Owen Sound's idea of getting more input from council. That's all.
Madam Treasurer, do you want to comment?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So Councillor Barfoot and I did have this discussion, and what I suggested was that I prepare a survey to get not only council's input on capital items, but also the public. So what we can do is we can post that survey, and I can get that done within the next week or two, and we can look for that feedback. Just to update council, I'm looking to do budget presentations in February 2021. Ideally, I would have loved to have done it this fall, but given the vacant positions in senior management, it was best to wait till February. So with council's blessing, I will prepare that survey.
Sounds like a great idea. Councillor Barfoot, did you hear that comment from the?
Yes, I did. And thank you very much, Cassie. Cassie and I just had a brief conversation about this. And I certainly appreciate the situation that the office staff is in. And I know we can't come out with a final figure or we'd like to wait until the Board of Education gets their rates set. And it would be nice if we could start the budget process earlier, but I can certainly understand, Madam Treasurer, why we can't. But I think, the suggestion you had about giving us something ahead of time to work on is an excellent one. And thank you very much for all your help and all your suggestions.
Okay, good comments, Councillor Barfoot. If we'll move on then with our agenda, and we have one add-on new business, the Francis Lake soap hauling issue. Do you want to turn it over to Madam Clerk first? Or sorry, looking at you, Madam CEO.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So I think I've already communicated the facts of the situation to council. And, you know, we do have a developer agreement that says that they will be responsible for maintenance. My comment would be that if council wanted to do snow removal on that road, we'd be looking at contracting it out at this point. But I'd also like to point out, we are not doing maintenance on the entirety of the remainder of Francis Drive. We are only talking about coming in on Big Rock Road, turning right on Francis Drive, and then turning right on Spencer. The portion of Francis Drive from Spencer to the dead end will not be maintained by the municipality. So any discussions that council has tonight, I want to make that very clear.
Thank you, Madam CEO, and to make it very clear to council, Mark Swanson did indicate to me they have hired their own snowplow operator to do that section of the road. He's already indicated that to me. Go ahead.
I just wanted to comment that it's quite an unfortunate chain of events that took place, but at the same time, it shows the emphasis on the need to communicate with council before, you know, committing council and the township to doing things outside of their scope. That's all I'm gonna say.
Fine, I agree with that comment. The unfortunate thing with Georgian Bus, we've had some staffing changes in the last while. It has given us some different situations which we're finding out that had that happen. We did have staff of Georgian Bus sending out emails saying they would assume that road and so on. Yes, staff at present now are trying to deal with it, knowing that we can't assume it until we have a proper protocol following. That's what we're doing. We're waiting for stuff from the developer to finalize that. My only concern is, and it's my personal view, I really feel that we owe the ratepayers and we're somewhat responsible. Council as a whole are responsible for our staff. And I really believe that since the commitment was made, we on the other side of east side of Francis Lake, even though we didn't assume that road, we did make a commitment to those people that we would plow the road this year. We've hired a contractor to do that. And I really feel that although we're in a situation now where we haven't assumed this part of the road to Spencer Road, Street, whatever it's called, back at the Big Bay, I really feel council should really consider hiring a contractor for this year to plow that section road until we can get this situation resolved to a better satisfaction. Because I believe next year we're going to be in a real good position that we can plow right straight through from the 14th all the way back through the subdivision and back out to County Road, Gray Road 17. And I really think that the people that live in there, the ratepayers, were acting in good faith, thinking they're getting good information. And that's why they abandoned their association, thinking that, good, there's a headache we have to worry about, but unfortunately, they are stuck with it. Now, Madam CEO, you made a comment about the developers responsible for maintenance and so on. I did have that conversation with one of the development partners, and he assured me that they did not have to plow any snow in that area because it was a association's job. And I don't really get into that discussion, but that's the comment he made to me. It's just, in my opinion, I really feel the situation we're in that we need to assure these people that the municipality will look after the snow plowing for this year. Deputy Mayor Carl.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. My fear on this one, since those residents have been given the impression that the municipality would be looking after snow removal this year, is that if we let any amount of snow build up on those roads before we get everything sorted out, and there is an accident, especially when children are going out that road to catch a bus, we're gonna be liable, because that chain of emails is gonna be used in court against us. So I think even before we get this sorted out on ownership of roads, we need to take that over just to save ourselves some liability.
Councilor Pringle?
Yeah, I'm in total agreement with you there, Mr. Mayor, that even though there's been miscommunication that's happened at different times on our end, the relay messages going to the taxpayer has been one that we were going to look after. And so I get that it's been a bad couple of scenarios, but at the end of the day, as a group here at the township, I really believe we got to look after these people that are taxpayers. Maybe a lesson learned for us in the township to better communicate, as Cass had mentioned there, that we got to do a better job. Yeah, at the end of the day, we got to follow some.
Thank you. Madam CEO.
Thank you. In anticipation of this conversation, I did have a discussion with Mr. Kibble, who you just approved plowing from concession 14 to the 1 foot reserve. He can provide those services for the remainder of Francis Drive to Spencer Avenue, or Spencer Street, Spencer, and to Big Rock Road. So he is willing to do that. I do not have a price on that, so I could report back to council on the price to add that addition. But in the meantime, I could tell him that he is to maintain that. It makes sense for him to do the remaining portion because it's really not that much more. But that would be my recommendation to council.
Thank you, Madam CEO. I just want to make it very clear. We're plowing roads only, not driveways.
Yes, just the road.
I just want to make that clear because this particular contractor did do their private driveways too, but we're just doing the roads only, just so it's very clear to everybody. Does council agree with the recommendation of the CAO? Madam Clerk, do I ask for a show of hands?
Agreed.
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 I believe we have consensus of council, Madam CEO, that you follow that direction.
Yes, thank you. And I will report back to council so that you are aware of the additional cost.
Okay. Maybe this particular contractor, since he's got a bigger contract, might re-look at his price. Just comment. Okay, we know other business, new business. We're down to notice of motion. I believe do we have any notice of motions? No? So we're down to closed session. That the council of the Township of Georgian Bluffs moves a closed session at 7:40 with interim CEO and clerk to discuss matters about closed sessions, matters about a personal individual. Madam Clerk, I'll let you read your part.
Thank you. So the motion will read that Council of the Township of Georgian Bluffs moves into closed session at 7:40 p.m. with the interim CAO and clerk to discuss 19.1 minutes of previous closed sessions, October 29th, 2020, November 9th, 2020, November 12th, 2020, and November 16th, 2020. Personal matters about identifiable individuals, a second item regarding personal matters about identifiable individuals as was added to the agenda formerly, and a second additional item regarding a position plan, procedure, criteria, or instruction to be applied to any negotiations carried on or to be carried on by or on behalf of the municipality or local board.
Thank you. Do I have someone to move put on the floor, please? Moved by Councilor Thompson, second by Deputy Mayor Carlton. If there's no discussion on the motion, all in favor of the motion?
4.
Motion is carried. We are now in closed session. You tell me when we can proceed, Madam Clerk.
I'll try to keep closed session short. Okay.
Really?
Kurt, we can proceed. We are now in open session. We only went in camera to discuss what we did in camera, nothing more. I have a confirming bylaw here, the bylaw 2021-29 being a bylaw to confirm the proceedings of council on November 25th, 2020. You read it first, second, third time, finally passed, signed with Mayor Kurt, sealed the corporation, and endorsed in the bylaw book. Someone to move to put on the floor, please. Moved by Deputy Mayor Carlton, second by Council Pringle. All in favor of the motion? It is carried. I need one more motion. Moved by Councillor Barfoot, second by Councillor Pringle, that we adjourn. All in favor? We are now adjourned. Thank you, Brittany.
Did you agree?